everybody who hasn't met me. My name is Artur Brizgalov. I'm a place branding manager at Brand Finance, and it's really honored to present to you our collaboration with the First Ladies and Gentlemen global platform and what we have been working on over the last few months. So I would like to start with the national identity. So when you see the list of those countries, what first comes to mind? For example, UK, Korea, Turkey, or Jordan. It could be British innovation. And the example here we have ARM's semiconductor company that successfully launches its licensing program in chips development. In Korea, it could be the Korean culture, such as Squid Game show, which, if I recall correctly, over 140 million viewers watched in the first 4 weeks after it was released. Turkey, well, it's quite famous for its amazing landscapes, and it's a magnet for tourist destinations. So statistics say that on average 50 million people visit Turkey every day for touristic purposes. And Jordan is really rich in its heritage. When it comes to those countries and many other countries in our report, there is another distinctive feature that defines those countries, and that's countries' flags. For some people, what defines a country are country leaders. But what is often overseen and forgotten in some countries are the partners of those leaders. So for example, here in the UK, we have Akshata Murthy that invests in development of British innovation. In Korea, there are multiple programs activated that are focused on promotion of Korean culture. In Turkey, First Lady of Turkey, she has a number of sustainability initiatives such as Zero Waste Initiative and many other ones that have proved to be quite effective throughout the years. And Queen Rania of Jordan established a foundation that helps to develop youth development. But let us take a step back to the Global Soft Power Index for those of you that just joined us in the afternoon. So the way that we measure soft power is a holistic approach. So we look at the reputation and influence simultaneously. Going a bit deeper, here is the full structure of the index. There are 35 attributes that define soft power distributed across 8 pillars. So here at Brand Finance, we thought, okay, what are the key attributes that drive the activities of First Ladies and Gentlemen? So what could be associated to those activities? Because if we can provide a link, this can help us to measure the impact of those activities on countries' soft power. And here are those 15 attributes. But this doesn't tell us much, unfortunately, because it's hard to tell which attributes are important and which ones are less so. So what we have done, we've conducted a driver's analysis, which is a statistical analysis that identifies those 15 attributes in the ranking of importance. So the first and the most influential one is influential in diplomatic circles. But what's more important on this slide is that out of those 15 attributes that we've identified, they together contribute to the 35% of the overall soft power index structure. So that's a substantial proportion of soft power index that First Ladies and Gentlemen can influence by creating initiatives, by continuing initiatives that have been put into place before them. And when it comes to quantifying the impact, there are 2 ways we can measure it. The first way is quite closely linked to the report that lies on your tables. And the second way is a monetary impact, the sort of impact that everybody understands. And on the first picture, we have quite a nice example of Oktoberfest that started in Germany, but has been exported to many other countries, and one of them is Brazil. If we look at France, that got 67.3 soft power score this year out of 100, I would like to run a sort of a mental exercise. So imagine that within those 15 attributes, the score has declined by 50%. So, and what might cause such an issue would be some internal affairs, as we saw last year in France with protests. So this would have a detrimental impact on the country's soft power. This will impact the score, and if that impact is much bigger, that would also impact the rank in the 193 ranking of soft power nations. Similarly, if initiatives are effective and they help to promote countries' soft power, the soft power score would increase. And an example of that would be the upcoming Olympic Games this summer. This is still yet to see what's going to happen, but using our analysis, we were able to project that it would increase France's soft power to 68.6. When it comes to economic impact, what we see in this chart is a scatter plot between soft power impact among those 15 attributes. So that's not overall soft power score, it's just those 15 attributes that we've selected, and performance of those 193 countries, and 2022 nominal GDP of those countries. And there is clearly a linear relationship between the two. So to put it simply, half a point increase in global soft power perceptions corresponds to 1.2 billion increase in economic value. So there is a direct relationship between the two. And on that note, let me introduce you to our panel. And thank you very much.
My name is Konrad Jagodziński. I am Place Branding Director at Brand Finance, and it is an honor to welcome today's panel discussion with our honorable guests, the First Lady of Iceland, Eliza Reid, the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, and the First Gentleman of Slovenia, Dr. Aleš Musar. Thank you so much for coming today, especially Madam Zelenska, given the circumstances in which Ukraine finds itself over the past 2 years. The whole audience appreciates your presence here. Thank you so much again. We have just seen your presentation about the initiative of the Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen, and we've seen the results of the analysis that Brand Finance has conducted to understand better the relationship between the work that First Ladies and Gentlemen do and soft power of nations all around the world. So, in that context, how do you see your role as a First Lady or a First Gentleman within the initiative of the summit, but also within building soft power for your respective nation brands? Would you like to start?
Just start with me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to share the stage with my colleagues here today. It's a question that I think about a lot because, as my colleagues as well know very much, this role of being a spouse of a head of state is not official in any sense, and we have not been elected to any official positions, and yet clearly the influence can be very important if we choose to make it so. And for me at least, I guess there's two things that I would like to come forward with. One is this idea of personal choice. I especially feel that because we are not serving in official positions, we should be able to choose in some senses how we are taking part. But one thing that I have always tried to emphasize in the almost 8 years that I have served in this role is to hopefully share the message with other people that every single one of us can have an influence. Every single one of us has some kind of soft power, if you will, in our own environments. And I find that with some of the big challenges that we face in our countries, in the world today, it's too easy for us to be downstream and to say, let's leave that to the politicians and let's leave that to the elected officials. They'll figure it all out for us. And I want people to say that those of us who aren't in an elected position still should be using our voices to advocate for change and to advocate for whatever issues it is that we feel are important. So for me personally, that's something that I have tried to do in this very incredible privilege that it is to serve in this unofficial role, is to show other people that we all have an influence out there and that we can all be role models in some way.
По-перше, в чому я абсолютно впевнена, що і перша леді, і перший джентльмен зараз будь-якої країни – це вже не просто протокольний супроводжувач для свого чоловіка або своєї дружини. Ми більше не +1 в запрошеннях на офіційні заходи. Це вже в минулому. Ми не просто маємо красиво посміхатися на фото поруч з президентом. У нас можуть бути свої треки, які мають доповнювати національні політики. І дуже важлива роль, яку можуть виконувати перші леді та джентльмени, бути медіатором між владою та суспільством. Ми представники громадянського суспільства, яких є голос, який можливо навіть краще чути, ніж в кого-небудь. Ми можемо говорити із своїм суспільством і говорити з суспільствами інших країн. У нас є майданчики для цих розмов. І тому ми маємо доносити думку суспільства до тих, хто приймає рішення у владі. Суспільство нам довіряє. Ми маємо це використовувати, цю можливість бути таким містком між тим, хто є тими, хто приймає рішення, і тих, хто очікує цих рішень. І вже ж я впевнена, що ми, супроводжуючи своїх президентів та прем'єр-міністрів на великих майданчиках, таких як Генеральна асамблея ООН або Давоський економічний форум, маємо мати свою повістку і маємо там також говорити про ті речі, які турбують наше суспільство. Тому у нас дуже величезна кількість можливостей. Тут головне розуміти, яким чином ти можеш їх використати. І в цьому може прийти на допомогу наш саміт, коли ми, колеги, можемо зорієнтувати, сфокусувати, допомогти новачку, наприклад, або разом об'єднавшись, об'єднати наші голоси за те, про що ми хочемо поговорити всі разом.
I'm thankful to Olena to bring the soft power index to our attention, particularly to myself as a newcomer. As you mentioned, I'm in this position for a bit more than a year, and as Eliza said, it is a choice. You can choose to be active or not, but if you do, it is important to remember that we are in service of our countries. To either reinforce the message which our country wants to put through or complement that. And it is a bit sobering that we can influence soft power index both ways. So making some kind of terrible mistake, I don't know, offending Eliza here on an open stage, it can
diplomatic crisis.
A little bit worsen the relations between Slovenia and Iceland, at least for a bit of a time. And what was also interesting today was learning that soft power translates into hard power, and that some aspects of soft power are being weaponized. Information, communication, and particularly misinformation, which are generally considered as parts of the soft power, are now being used, or if you wish, misused. And it's good to know that we have a place in that power continuum which influences how the others perceive our countries. But also what Olena mentioned is we have soft power within the country. And this is could be a completely different story from the international perspective.
Thank you for these insights. You mentioned being a bridge, you mentioned having your own initiatives, you mentioned echoing what the country is already doing to project itself and also to have that unifying role within the country. But at the same time, there are ramifications. There is internal politics, domestic politics within the country, party politics, and then there is international politics. How do you balance all that with your personal initiatives, with the work that you're trying to do? Because obviously, as you mentioned as well, it can backfire, and it's a very, very difficult balance to tread.
Okay. Well, I think in my role as well, the heads of state often serve different functions in some senses in different countries. For example, in Iceland, my husband, the president, is the head of state. We also have a prime minister who is the head of government, who represents a political party and who has a specific political platform. And so my husband's role is not to express a political viewpoint. It's to really serve as a unifying figure for the country and to not be overtly political. For me as the spouse, I therefore try to take that on as well and to present a unified front also at home. But I think in an international context, that means that means representing Iceland's values on the global stage. And for me, those values have to do with living in an open, free society that emphasizes gender equality, diversity, sustainability. And so for me, when I speak on the global stage and that I talk about those values that we have as a society without putting them into certain political platforms or partisan politics and kind of trying to look over that. But you're right, and I think we have this chance sometimes because we're not in a party. Sometimes we get to break the rules a little bit more in a good way that our spouses maybe can't.
Додам, я вас замучую сьогодні з цими навушниками. Не знімайте просто. Я додам, що для того, щоб не балансувати, насправді, потрібно, щоб твої проєкти внутрішні співпадали з тим, що ти транслюєш назовні. Наприклад, я займаюся всередині країни проєктом з ментального здоров'я, і ця тема хвилює всіх і на зовнішньому, і в зовнішньому секторі, і тому мої тези не змінюються. Я продовжую свою роботу, просто розширюю її. А вже ж не може бути такого, щоб ти на зовнішньому треку наголошував на якихось важливих подіях і не займався цим всередині країни. Якщо ти говориш про зелену енергетику, і в тебе немає проєкту зеленої енергетики всередині країни, це неправильно. І вже ж всі дії про те, що хвилює твою державу, те, що для неї зараз потрібно. І тут, можливо, я, як сказала Еліза, іноді виходжу за протокольні рамки, тому що вже ж я ніколи не могла собі уявити, що мені доведеться говорити не про diversity, і, наприклад, шкільне харчування для дітей, а я мушу говорити про зброю, про засоби протиповітряної оборони, тому що всі в Україні, і я також, хочемо жити і хочемо бути захищеними. Тому все, про що думає твоє суспільство, це втілюється в політиках політичного керівництва. І все це продовжується в діяльності дружини президента, просто з іншою риторикою, по-іншому. А вже ж я не буду говорити нотами дипломатичними. Я не говорю такою формальною мовою, як політики, але я можу розповідати історію людей. Зараз, на жаль, тих, хто страждає і бореться за свою свободу і життя. І це просто інший формат тих самих цілей, які стоять перед Україною. І я намагаюся використовувати будь-який майданчик для того, щоб більше говорити про те, що нас турбує. Сподіваюся, що накопичення великої кількості таких виступів дає свої результати.
Mine is cultural heritage, which is kind of fortunate because this is one of the topics which is less exposed, particularly in international relations, and it is beneficial that we have the opportunity to speak about the topics which are generally not so much in the front of international relations. Saying that, it happens to be co-opted into other subjects as well, gladly, I must say, and one of those is mental health. Last year's summit in Kiev was devoted to that, and to prepare for that I had to learn quite a lot and learned that there is really very much going on in this field, both inside Slovenia and as humanitarian aid to other countries. So I'm again thankful to you that I got to be active in another field which is beneficial both to the country and to international cooperation of the country.
Thank you. Now, today is very much about sharing best practice, sharing experiences and learning from each other and looking at the tangible aspects of soft power, of the examples of how soft power can impact the work that is done in the country and the image of that country abroad. So I just wanted to ask you about some of your initiatives, to give us a bit more about the exact examples of what you have been doing, just to inspire others, and perhaps also those First Ladies and Gentlemen who might be tuning in and listening from afar, as we know this is available to everyone to watch. So Dr. Musar, you mentioned cultural heritage is your passion. Could you just give us a few examples of the initiatives that you've started over the past 2 years?
Well, first you have to know that the state visits take about 1 day.
Yeah.
So there's really not that much time unless you prepare for that. And I try to find areas where we can establish very concrete cooperation between the institutions from 2 countries. For example, last year in Slovakia, I had quite an interesting exchange at the University Library of Bratislava, which is now going to sign the cooperation agreement with our national library. We are trying to, the Office of the President, through me in this case, is trying to foster cooperation between 2 of our cultural institutions with the counterparts in Italy. And in Bulgaria, from which I actually flew directly here to London, with the First Lady we were speaking about the events where it would be good if a troop, for example, from our country would come to Bulgaria. And next year there is an event in Slovenia where Bulgarians, being in the arts and crafts in that particular area, would be very much welcome. And I think this will actually happen. There are really small steps, but this is what we can do. We can have great ideas, but small steps really count.
Mm-hmm. You're also involved in restoring cultural heritage within Slovenia in a very tangible format, is that right?
Oh, that's a much broader subject, the whole cultural heritage protection. Yes, I did a project myself, gained quite a lot of experience with that, and within Slovenia I'm really spending most of the time working on promotion of cultural heritage, being present. Sometimes it is enough to say that somebody cares. I'm sure that you have similar experiences with that. And this is not something you can achieve overnight. I count on 5 years term to actually accomplish something tangible.
Mm-hmm. No, of course. And Madam Zelenska, given Ukraine's geopolitical situation and being in a state of war, facing Russian aggression every day, not just for the past 2 years, but since 2014, that is obviously a different situation. And you mentioned about having to talk about arms and having to talk about defense, which is not what a First Lady would normally perhaps talk about. How do you see your impact on the things that are happening within Ukraine and are happening to Ukraine? You mentioned the results of Ukraine in our last year's study, where we saw that soft power of Ukraine has gone through the roof. It has also helped muster the international support. So that role is really vital and can have a very tangible impact, can't it?
Важливо обирати для себе проекти, які будуть не тільки показувати швидкі і приємні результати. Для мене важливо обирати той проєкт, який дасть результати, можливо, в стратегічному майбутньому. І тому, наприклад, проєкт реформи шкільного харчування в Україні, який був дуже важливий для мене перед повномасштабним вторгненням, ми не зупинили і продовжуємо працювати над цим і під час цього ворожого вторгнення, тому що розуміємо, що дитяче здоров'я, яке закладається і також через харчування, які діти отримують в школі, це наше майбутнє, це те, яке покоління ми виростемо, це люди, які будуть приймати рішення в майбутньому. Те саме стосується програми ментального здоров'я, яка називається в Україні «Ти як?». В перші місяці після вторгнення ми зрозуміли, що ми змінюємося. Кожен із нас має уже проблеми, які можуть бути в подальшому розвинутися в різні ще більші проблеми. Тому маємо діяти зараз. І майже кожен такий проєкт, я впевнена, зараз демонструє навіть і світові те, що ми плануємо Україна планує на багато років вперед, як ми будемо розбудовувати, зокрема, безбар'єрні міські простори, як ми ростимо своїх дітей, як ми плекаємо свою психологічну стійкість. І це означає те, що ми не збираємося закінчувати цю війною програшем. Це означає, що ми віримо в своє майбутнє. І це має також, мені здається, надихати і також грати на позитивний імідж України. Я в цьому впевнена, і мені дуже хочеться в це вірити. Зараз дуже важлива для України тема – це розповсюдження знань про інформації про нашу культуру, наші історичні зв'язки з європейськими країнами, про те, що було спотворене багатьма роками Російська імперія, потім Радянського Союзу, про те, яких митців і вироби мистецтва Росія привласнила, а вони насправді є українськими. Ми наразі зараз маємо розповідати світові про те, хто ми є, і світ по-іншому дивиться на нас. Дуже багато плям в українській культурі, світлих плям, білих плям, про які світ, на жаль, не знає. Ми маємо заповнювати цю інформацію. І це також велике завдання, яке я ставлю перед собою. Мені здається, що ми потихеньку додаємо до цього великого завдання і своїх зусиль. Але головне, що я хотіла сказати, що не треба боятися стратегічних великих проєктів, результату яких ти можеш не побачити. Зусилля особисті колись підсилюються тими людьми, які починають тебе підтримувати, коли вірять, бачать, що ти це віриш особисто дуже сильно. І я вже багато разів бачила, коли люди, які спочатку не вірили, до речі, в створення саміту перших леді та джентльменів, я бачила скептичні погляди багатьох дипломатів, які казали, вам не вдасться взагалі їх зібрати і 3 людини в Києві. Нам вдалося, ми зібрали і збираємо все більше і більше, тому головне вірити і мислити стратегічно.
Definitely the initiative of the summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen is a great example of soft power in its own right, because obviously it showcases Ukrainian ingenuity and resolve, even at a very difficult time. And coming on to you, Madam Reid, with Iceland being admired for environmental leadership and for gender equality, these are also the issues that you mentioned are close to you. Mm-hmm. Could you share a few examples of the initiatives that you've taken during your time as the First Lady?
Sure. I mean, when it comes to gender equality, that's something that I personally have always been very interested in. And I guess I'm fortunate in Iceland that Iceland tops the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index and has for the past 14 years, which colloquially means that we are, the world's best country for women. So we have a lot of ways to go to close that gap. But I remember when my husband was first elected president in 2016, I thought, well, it's too bad that I want to talk about gender equality, but I can't do that because it would be too ironic to talk about gender because of something my husband achieved. And I think, in life we have to get over that sometimes and try to use the platforms that we have. But I really liked Olena's comment earlier when you talked about the fact that the days, and I hope I agree with you, the days of the spouse standing by being a kind of accessory to their spouse's genius and hard work, I hope are passing, even though I dare to say we're all very proud of our spouses and their achievements. But I think that we can offer so much more than that. And one of the things that, for me, as the female spouse of a male head of state, that I have always tried to do is to kind of confound those expectations, because I think that those stereotypes still exist. I think that people still sometimes see us a little bit as accessories. And so I try to change that a lot. A way within Iceland that I do that as well is the fact that maybe you can tell from my accent, I wasn't born or raised in Iceland. I come from Canada originally, and I moved to Iceland as an adult. I learned the Icelandic language as an adult. And I think that that is important to show people within Iceland that just because I speak with an accent, that I make mistakes, doesn't mean that I don't have something important to say, and doesn't mean that I can only talk about immigrant issues. that's a way to just use my voice to speak up for issues like entrepreneurship, women doing different things has been important. And then you talked about sustainability. The number one contributor that we have to our country's GDP is tourism. And many people know, especially here in the UK, know Iceland's nature. And I do a lot of talks to talk about sustainability and nature, because that, to me, when it comes to tourism and travel, links to our values as a country as well. In 2017, I was named a United Nations Special Ambassador for Tourism and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I try to do a lot of speeches abroad at travel conferences and other events to promote that idea of sustainability in travel. And I'll add as a tiny additional one that clips in maybe to some of these, the more expected press that we've often had as spouses, which has to do with what we're wearing and what we look like. So I often wear secondhand clothing when I'm going to events or do things, and that gets a lot of attention for the environmental aspect or for what it represents. And I think that's another example of soft power and the kind of subtle messaging and signals that you can send.
And it's certainly coming across, because we're seeing in our Global Soft Power Index that Iceland is recognized for its sustainability credentials and for its gender equality and diversity as well, and supporting tolerance. Fantastic to see that, all of that can be done on brand. What we're talking about is those nation brands and how they can help build those perceptions and change those perceptions. And it's interesting that within your roles, it's not just perceptions of the country, but it's also the perception of the role that you have to challenge oftentimes. And I think that could be an inspiration for many, I suppose, that it is possible, and it just requires hard work, doesn't it? As a final question, because we will need to be wrapping up in about 5 minutes, I was just wondering, what are your views for the role of a First Lady or a gentleman going forward in the years to come? Where obviously our world is changing massively. And Dr. Musar, you mentioned misinformation, disinformation. We've got technological change, social media, and there is an erosion of trust in governments in general. So to what extent are government leaders still being trusted? And to what extent is there a space for the spouses of those government leaders to perhaps help restore that trust and to help support them in remaining important within the rules-based system that we have in the international space? And I suppose a specific question to all of you, but particularly to Madam Zelenska, about the future of the summit of the First Ladies and Gentlemen. What are the plans for the years to come?
Дуже дякую. Просте запитання про плани з приводу саміту. Будемо розширювати свої можливості, збільшувати коло партнерів. Ми трансформуємося в глобальну платформу саміту, не хочемо більше зустрічатися тільки раз на рік, хочемо збільшувати кількість майданчиків, на яких ми можемо зустрічатися, тому що, як казав Алеш, офіційний візит в будь-яку країну – це один день, максимум 2. Ти не встигаєш зробити нічого. А якщо ти зустрічаєшся, наприклад, коли зустрічаються пари, президент з подружжям, там взагалі нам виділено 15 хвилин на чай, і це образливо насправді. Ми маємо це змінити. Ми не приїхали подивитися одне на одну і попити чаю. Ми приїхали поспівпрацювати. Тому нам потрібно більше майданчиків, потрібно більше можливостей. Хочемо співпрацювати з Генасамблеєю ООН, щоб вони надали нам можливість зібрань під час їхніх сесій в вересні. Працюємо з Давосом і шукаємо ще інші майданчики. У нас є плани щодо комунікаційної кампанії глобальної платформи саміту. Хочемо розповсюджувати новини про кожного з нас. У нас в кожного є багато чого розповісти. Тільки що 2 моїх колег розповіли багато про те, чого вони досягли, чим вони займаються. А таких колег сотні в світі. У нас є представниці з Белізу, у нас є представники з Азії, у нас представники з Сполучених Штатів, з Канади. І ми маємо ще розповідати і примножувати і свої зусилля, і розповідати взагалі нашим громадянам, що ми робимо багато для того, щоб їхнє життя покращувалося. Мені здається, що ми проходимо потрішки той етап, до речі, гендерної рівності, коли чоловіки, подружжя, жінок-президенток до нас почали приєднуватися. Мені особливо було спочатку складно вмовити моїх перших 3 друзів, це пан Алеш, перший джентльмен з Словакії, і також перший джентльмен Данії, мій дорогий друг Бо Тенберг. Я доклала багато зусиль для того, щоб вони почули і зрозуміли, що вони не мають стояти за спиною своєї дружини, що вони мають стати поруч, і це не жіноча роль бути другом в подружжі, це нормальна людська можливість стати важливим для своєї країни, коли ти маєш цей голос. Тому в моїх планах розширити чоловічу присутність в саміті і взагалі розширювати наші можливості на більшу кількість майданчиків.
And regarding the future of the role within your eyes, Dr. Musar?
As Olena said, we are actually developing a network. The meetings which are visible are the small part of it. My experience is that I'm finding myself in a company of people with knowledge, experience, values, and will to do something, while at the same time being prepared to subject their roles to the supporting role. The efforts of Olena and the others who are joining that are something which is not really visible and might become visible in a few years. Because we met in Kiev and we saw each other now, but in between there was a lot of correspondence, a few Zoom meetings, a Zoom meeting with Brand Finance, for which I am really grateful, because coming from the sciences, I feel reassured when I see that there is research and data behind what we are doing, so I can really say, aha, so we can plan the next steps here, either, I don't know, building on the strengths we already have or filling the gaps we don't. I cannot really comment on what is the difference between first ladies and first gentlemen, because I've never been a first lady. But I can tell you that there are really very few of us. I believe it might be somewhere between 10 and 15 worldwide, which means that the proportion here is really something unusual. 1 in 3, and Olena achieved actually 3 in 9 in person last year in Kiev. And regarding this picture, I can only say what I said in a meeting in Skopje when I was 1 of 5, that there are not enough men here. By which I do not mean that there should be more people like me speaking at such panels, but that there should be more women like my wife being in leadership positions.
Hear, hear. Madam Reid, any final comments?
I feel like all I can do
forward?
is agree with my dear colleagues here. It's such an incredible privilege to be able to serve in these capacities, and I am so grateful to Olena for founding the Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen to provide us with this opportunity to share experiences. But I'd also like to reiterate a point that Aleš made at the beginning about the fact that we are here to serve our countries, and what an incredible honor and privilege that is. And I hope that while we get to know each other and use this network and do that as well, that we can share the message that we are here at the service of our own countries, but hopefully also being able to provide that support and inspiration to people in our own nations and in other countries to take agency with what you're doing in your lives, not to leave everything to other people, to use the networks and the opportunities that each of you has to be able to spread that influence for positive change, for whatever issues you feel are important. Think about think about the impact we would all have in the world if we all do that.
Thank you all so much for this inspirational discussion, and I wish you all the best, the Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen, to become the force in the world that you all wanted to be. We're delighted and honored to provide this platform for our summits to overlap, if you like, and to join forces and provide the analysis and the data, as you said, Dr. Musar, to lay a foundation for the work that you're doing and to support the arguments that you have to change the perception, not just of your countries, but of the roles that you are fulfilling so bravely. Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today.